Hello and welcome to this astrological forecast for the sign of Aries for the year of 2025. I strongly recommend using these videos for your rising sign for the greatest accuracy, but you may also use them for your sun and or moon signs if you so desire. The first item I want to mention for 2025 is the fact that Pluto is now in Aquarius to stay for almost another 2 decades, indicating deep and powerful shifts and transformations in the area of your friends, groups, allies, hopes, and wishes for not just this year, but many years to come. The era of Pluto in Capricorn from 2008 to 2024 is now completely over, and a new era has begun, with 2025 being the first full year of it. Pluto in Aquarius will continue to transform your relationship with technology, the collective, and the future. Its time in Aquarius will create long-lasting changes in your business, shared resources, or issues of life and death. On February 23rd, Mars stations direct in Cancer. This is part of an ongoing story for you linking your home, family, or living situation with your fun, love, creative self-expression, or leisurely activities, and involving an increased level of focus and energy output in these areas for many months. Mars was initially in your 4th house from September 4th, 2024 to November 3rd, 2024, heating things up in your home, family, or living situation before ingressing into your 5th house, where it remained from November 3rd, 2024 until January 6th, 2025, and from where it stationed retrograde on December 6th, 2024, heating things up in your fun, love, creative self-expression, or leisurely activities. Due to Mars retrograde, however, these areas became part of one overall story throughout these months. And now on February 23rd, as Mars stations direct, it is time for the final act of this story to begin. This will last for the remainder of Mars post-retrograde shadow period, which concludes on May 2nd, 2025, but may for some continue to linger all the way until Mars departs from Leo and your 5th house and enters Virgo on June 17th, 2025. It is also worth noting that for much of this Mars retrograde that we just went over, Mars is also opposite Pluto in Aquarius, challenging you to undergo deep transformations involving not just your home, family, living situation, fun, love, creative self-expression, and leisurely activities, but also your friends, groups, and allies, with Pluto now being in your 11th house. I advise that you do not resist this challenge or its required high energy output, but instead willingly take it on as the brave and heroic Aries individual that you are. Regardless of how you choose to use this energy, know that by May or June of this year, you will be deeply and thoroughly transformed. On March 1st, Venus stations retrograde in your sign of Aries. Similar to the Mars retrograde, this too is its own story, but this one is just getting started, with Venus not only signifying relationships in general, but also ruling your 7th house of major relationships and stationing retrograde in your 1st house of self. It is safe to say that this will be a period of time for you personally to reflect on your relationships. Since Venus will retrograde back into Pisces and your 12th house, this is likely to bring up 12th house issues of loss and suffering in relationships, but also the transcendence of that suffering, often through spirituality. The retrograde itself lasts from March 1st through April 12th, during which time it will tend to be at its most intense. But when we add in the pre-retrograde and post-retrograde shadow periods, the whole thing lasts from January 28th to May 16th. During this time, your relationships will be put through necessary stress testing. It is also possible that relationships from the past could resurface. Venus has an 8-year synodic cycle, meaning its retrogrades and their themes repeat every 8 years. Thus, you can look back to what happened in your life around March and April of 2017 when Venus last retrograded through this area of the zodiac and know that those themes will tend to repeat in some way this year. This retrograde may end up having a lasting effect on your money or values. By now, you may be thinking March is going to be a particularly active month, and you are made even more right by the fact that it is also our first eclipse season this year. This is a time when very fateful, unexpected, and often chaotic developments can take place. The lunar nodes recently shifted into the Virgo-Pisces axis and thus your 6th and 12th house axis, indicating a transition away from fateful relationship developments that you've been experiencing for the past year and a half or so and into fateful developments involving your physical or mental health, your daily schedule, accidents or injuries, your work, as well as loss and or the transcendence of suffering. This new theme is likely to be particularly felt on or around March 14th when we have a lunar eclipse in Virgo and your 6th house of work and health health. However, the following solar eclipse takes place on March 29th in Aries and your first house of self, indicating there is still some finishing up to be done in this theme of self versus other that you have been experiencing. On June 9th, Jupiter ingresses into Cancer, where it will remain for the rest of the year. This is a most fortunate development, especially if you were born during the daytime, as Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer. Its presence in your fourth house indicates that it will bring growth and generally good fortune to your home, family, or living situation for the rest of the year. The period of growth and expansion prior to this in your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you has by this point concluded. You may notice in the chart on screen, however, that Jupiter is closely square to Saturn in Aries at the time of this ingress. The Jupiter-Saturn square is something we have all been dealing with for some time now, first becoming a theme in late May of 2024. It represents the growth in one area of our lives bumping up against limitations in another area of our lives. What this means for you, Aries, is that the growth in your home, family, or living situation may push you personally to your limits if you're not careful. The full situation is a little more complicated than that, but I am keeping it simple here for the sake of clarity. On July 13th, Saturn stations retrograde in your sign of Aries conjunct Neptune. This is a big deal. The presence of Saturn and Neptune in Aries for part of this year represents a huge shift involving themes of the dissolving of boundaries and making permeable what was previously impassable. This is taking place in your first house of self and thus relates to you personally, your character, physical body, or even appearance. You may feel paradoxically more limited yet limitless at the same time. You may find yourself wanting to bring more structure to dreams, imagination, creativity, or spiritual practice as it relates to you personally. Saturn will be within a 1-degree orb of Neptune from June 9th through August 4th, so this is the period of time where you can expect the greatest intensity of these developments for now. I say for now because both planets will retrograde back into Pisces before too long and not return to Aries to stay until next year, making this summer something of a preview of things to come. On September 6th, Uranus stations retrograde in Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius. Similar to what we just went over with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, Uranus' presence in Gemini for part of this year also indicates a huge shift, this one involving the shaking up of things in your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you. This too, however, is only a preview of things to come, as Uranus retrogrades back into Taurus by the end of the year and won't be in Gemini to stay until next year. Its trine to Pluto on September 6th, however, should not be underestimated. This indicates a sudden liberation of repressed fear or desire taking place in the areas of your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you, as well as your friends, groups, allies, hopes, or wishes, and having a lasting effect on your business, shared resources, or issues of life and death. Since both the 3rd and 11th houses can signify friends, this area of your life is especially likely to be affected. Uranus will be within a 1-degree orb of Pluto from August 11th through October 28th, so you can expect the greatest intensity of these developments to occur within that time frame, due to Uranus often indicating very sudden events. I would also pay particular attention to September 5th, 6th, and 7th, with those being immediately before, during, and after its exact retrograde station. Speaking of September 7th, it is also the day of a lunar eclipse in Pisces, making this period of time even more likely for unexpected and fateful occurrences. This event kicks off the main part of our second eclipse season of the year, lasting until the solar eclipse on September 21st in Virgo, but not technically ending until September 28th. Again, this is a time when there is likely to be fateful developments involving your physical or mental health, schedule, work, accidents or injuries, loss, or transcendence of suffering. It is a continuation of the story from the eclipse season earlier in the year, and it will continue still further during the eclipse seasons of next year. The final event we will examine takes place on November 4th when Mars opposes Uranus. Normally, I wouldn't necessarily include this in a yearly context because it is such a short-term event, but this aspect between these two planets is so powerful that it may very well end up defining the whole final quarter of the year. When angry Mars opposes unpredictable Uranus, you experience a sudden challenge in the area of your beliefs, education, travel, or worldview that ends up affecting you personally, your business, shared resources, or issues of life and death, as well as your friends, groups, or allies. While this event is likely to be quite disruptive, it can also be very liberating. With Mars ruling your first house of self and Uranus being the Great Awakener, you may in fact at this time be challenged to awaken. 2025 is a year that really changes everything, and I am not just saying that. Astrologers like myself have had their eye on this year for half a decade or more now, and that is due to it having so many obvious signs of great change. It is not common at all that in one year we have Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn all changing signs, with Pluto just having changed signs not long before the year began. It is truly the beginning of a new era on both an individual and collective level. However, we must also remember that in the case of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they are just dipping into their next signs this year and won't be in them to stay until 2026, meaning that the real period of change is 2025 and 2026. This year is made even more intense by the fact that right as the Mars retrograde is finishing up early in the year, the Venus retrograde is beginning right after, forcing us to reassess our motivations, desires, and relationships. Eclipses activate entire new areas of our lives by virtue of the lunar nodes changing signs. So I hope you have listened closely to all that I have here said, for 2025 is a year we will never, ever forget.